Hi guys, welcome back on the channel. In today's video, creating miniature armies, we're going to talk about the third part of the 100 Years War, the Lancastrian War, 1415-1453. I jumped in the Caroline War because there's not much difference in miniatures, but we're going to go back to it, I promise. So let's talk about and see our content, what is happening in the Lancastrian War, because it starts very good for the English and obviously it ends badly. The Lancastrian War was the third and final phase of the Anglo-French Hundred Years War. It lasted from 1415, when King Henry V of England invaded Normandy, to 1453, when the English lost Bordeaux. It followed a long period of peace from the end of Caroline War in 1389. The phase was named after the House of Lancaster, the ruling house of the Kingdom of England, to which Henry V belonged. So the Lancastrian Wars had two parts. The first part where the English dominated, and the second part where obviously the English lost the war. Henry V of England asserted a claim of inheritance through the female line, with female agency and inheritance recognized in English law, but prohibited in France by the Salic law of the Silent Franks. The first half of the phase of the war was dominated by the Kingdom of England. Initial English successes, notably at the famous Battle of Agincourt, coupled with divisions among the French ruling class, allowed the English to gain control of large parts of France. The second half of this phase of the war was dominated by the Kingdom of France. French forces counterattacked, inspired by Joan of Arc, La Hire, and the Count of Dunois, and aided by the English loss of its main allies, the Duke of Burgundy and Brittany. So historical battles. Let's see what battles you can fight. Obviously, we have the Battle of Agincourt, 1415, 25th of October. English longbowmen under Henry V defeated French under Charles d'Albert, a battle that we have fought, all of us, many times. Now let's see other battles where you can find and you can fight. The Battle of Cravant, 1423, not very famous. 1st of July, French and Scottish armies defeated at Cravant, on the banks of the River Yonne. The English were with the Burgundians. A very interesting battle. You can have a river between and a small bridge, and the armies try to cross the river. Very interesting battle. The Battle of Verneuil, where you can find a video, many videos, about it in my channel. 1425 of August, the French and Scottish forces are decisively defeated in what becomes a second Agincourt for the French. Another great battle. You can have English against Franco-Scottish, so again more armies. The Battle of the Herrings, another very interesting battle. An English force under Sir John Fastolf defeats French and Scottish armies. The English deployed behind their carts full of herrings. You can find this battle again in my historical battles. The Battle of Patay, very interesting battle, 1429, 18th of June. French army under La Hire, Richmond, Joan of Arc, and other commanders break through English archers under Lord Talbot. Lord Talbot, obviously, the Achilles of the English, and then pursue and mop up the other sections of the English army, killing and capturing about half, 2,200 of their troops. The Earl of Salisbury, the Earl of Shrewsbury, Talbot, and Hungerford are captured. A great battle where the French didn't let the English deploy stakes, and they caught the English by surprise, while, the famous Joan of Arc phrase, "You have spurs, use them," she said to her commanders. The Battle of Formigny, another great battle. French force under the Duke of Bourbon and Richmond defeats an English force under Thomas Curiel. 3,774 English deaths and 1,500 captured. Thomas Curiel, the English general, was captured in action. So battles now, the scale is turning. And then obviously the last battle of the 100 Years War, the Battle of Castillon in 1453, where the French army under Jean Bureau defeats an English army under John Talbot to end the 100 Years War. This was also the first battle in European history where the use of cannon was a major factor in determining the victor. John Talbot was killed in action, 4,000 English killed in this battle. So there is a lot of battles you can fight with a lot of variety of armies and variety of weapons, especially the lighter battles like the Battle of Castillon, where the French basically mastered gunpowder and managed to nullify totally the longbowmen. So let's talk about armies. So we have the English army. How the English deployed men-at-arms flanked by longbowmen behind stakes, as you see at the top. At the bottom also there's an option with sometimes English longbowmen were deployed between men-at-arms so they can shoot in the last minute the knights who were approaching. Typically, an English fought like this till the end. It was very successful up to a point, but then when the French managed to master gunpowder, it was very difficult for the English to succeed. Now, we have the French. How are the French deployed? The French deployed typically with 3 battles, men-at-arms and mounted knights, usually in each flank. Low-class troops were pushed in the back until the second part of the war, when they deployed with smaller professional armies and became experts in gunpowder. So you see French deployed typically, even in the first parts of the war, men-at-arms, 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 and knights in the flanks. Slowly, the French realized that the great number of their armies was a hindrance than an advantage, and they reduced their armies no more than 10,000 in the latter parts of the Hundred Years' War, and they were more professional, and they were not based in nobles, and there were nobles, obviously, but there were not so many nobles who created havoc in the organization of the army. Then you have the Scottish, who played an important part in the latter parts of the Hundred Years' War. They had sometimes, the biggest force in the battle. Now, the Scots really didn't have any special deployment. They had very good experienced men-at-arms, really high quality, even better than the French at a point, and some Scottish archers, like in Verneuil, flanking them and supporting them. Just note that Scottish archers were as good as the English, but they were not as many. You have to note that. And then we have Burgundians, who were basically the allies of the English up to a point. I don't have a Burgundian army. When they were the allies of the English, they followed generally the English generals' typical deployment behind stakes, and usually the Burgundian were men-at-arms. But eventually, when they stopped being allies with the English, they fought typically like French. They were French, obviously, but it's known that they used stakes, strategy taken from the English, to protect their longbowmen. So let's go miniatures and basing. What are we going to do? Let's see the differences between the eras and what miniatures we can use. Now you see this is a typical late Hundred Years' War armor. This is Perry. Look, it's full plate armor, a little bit of chainmail that afterwards was removed, and they had, again, plate. These are the typical knights, high-quality knights. You can have, of course, lower classes, but always, even longbowmen would have found partial plate somewhere, and they would put it as part of their armor. So, in my opinion, 60 by 40 bases and 40 by 40 bases are the best, because they can be added together, and you can play any type of rule set. Just remember to portray your armies well. When the troop is close order, like heavy infantry, knights, they were together. They were close order. They were fighting side by side. So try to put more miniatures. For example, in my 40 by 40 bases, I put 4, and for open order troops like longbowmen and lighter troops, I put 3. So it's nice to be visible, the difference of a close order and open order troop. It's something I like, and I think it will look a lot of historically accurate. Now let's say difference and how we can use from other eras knights. We cannot use, actually. You see on the left the Lancastrian War. The knights have, the horses have plates. The knights are almost full of plate, with some, of course, not all knights had full plate everywhere, but they had pieces of plate, and they had also chainmail. You see on the right the Edwardian War, a lot of cloth, a lot of chainmail, a totally different type of helm and armor. It's really, it wouldn't have been used even from lesser men-at-arms. Again, the same here in the Lancastrian War. The spearmen of the French have pavises. For example, the pavises arose a bit later in the Hundred Years' War. But you see on the left, the Edwardian War, a lot of cloth, not really anything, not even chainmail. So you see, it's quite, I mean, you may have had people like this in the army, but they would have found a plate or some chainmail. It was more common at that time in the end of the Hundred Years' War, and they would not have been so without anything on them. But they can be used. Maybe they can be used. Again, the longbowmen here you see on the left, Edwardian War, basically clothes. On the right, even their cumbersomes are more robust of the late Hundred Years' War, and you see some chainmail that the archer found here, and they would probably have some pieces of partial plate. So maybe the archers can be mixed a bit, I think, but again, they would have been quite less equipped. Now I show you both the Earls of Douglas, one in the Lancastrian War and one in the Edwardian War. You see a huge difference in the helm, in the plate armor and partial plate armor, even, and also have to mention the shields. There were quite a lot of shields during the early part of the Hundred Years' War, but afterwards, when the full plate armor was invented or created, and they had double-handed weapons, very few knights used to have and carry a shield, but they were quite common in the earlier part of the Hundred Years' War. Again, you see here how different are the two armies. On the left, Lancastrian War, they're like tanks. Look at plate everywhere, a bit of chainmail, but plate everywhere. On the right, we have Edwardian. You see there's a lot of cloth, a lot of chainmail, minimal plate, although here you have a high commander, different helms, so it cannot be mixed very well. This is quite different eras. Maybe the lower fighters could have worn all the clothes, obviously, but you see the high class and the nobles would probably have very good armor, very different from before. Again, the same here. On the left, you see almost like tanks of the Lancastrian War and the Edwardian War, a lot of shields that they wouldn't have, probably in the later parts because of the armor and the double-handed weapons, and obviously very different helms. So let's go and talk about a few commanders. Let's see some commanders, and there are too many commanders of the era, Joan of Arc and King Henry V, but let's see some I have. So Jean d'Orléans, Count of Dunois, now he's one of the most famous commanders. He was a comrade of Joan of Arc. Charles d'Albert, another great commander, Constable of France, who died in the Battle of Agincourt. Jean I, Duke of Alençon, died in the Battle of Agincourt, was known to have attacked King Henry V and hit him in the helmet, breaking a part of the crown, apparently, until he was ganged and killed by Henry V's bodyguards. La Hire, famous commander, companion of Joan of Arc. You can see also their heraldry here on the top. Again, John of Lancaster, Duke of Bedford, one of the most famous commanders. His death really was the end of the 100 Years' War for the English. John VIII of Harcourt was killed at the Battle of Verneuil by Bedford's army. Then two very famous commanders during the 100 Years' War, the latter part of the 100 Years' War, obviously, and the earlier part for Douglas, but these are, you see how the armor is, how different. So John Stuart, Earl of Buchan, and Archibald Douglas, 4th Earl of Douglas, who both died in the Battle of Verneuil. Again, another two famous commanders, Thomas Camoys, 1st Baron of Camoys, who was commanding the left flank of the English at Agincourt. He was 6th, apparently. And, of course, the Achilles of the English, John Talbot, 1st Earl of Shrewsbury, who died in the Battle of Castillon, fighting without an armor, as he promised, and this was the end of the 100 Years' War. Again, Marshal Boucicaut, Jean II Lemengre, I think. He was captured at the Battle of Agincourt. He was Marshal of France, a great warrior, a great commander. You see the plate everywhere in the horses, very different from the latter periods. And Gilbert V d'Umfreville, who died at the Battle of Beaujeu with the Duke of Clarence. And this is from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this Creating Miniature Armies. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and bye-bye.